The cabin lights were dimmed on American Airlines Flight 633, the Boeing 777-300, cruising smoothly at 37,000 feet somewhere over the vast emptiness of the Nevada desert. 3 hours into the routine transcontinental flight from New York JFK to Los Angeles, most of the 289 passengers had settled into that comfortable rhythm of long-distance travel, some reading, some watching movies on seatback screens, some dozing. In seat 11D, tucked into the middle seat of economy class, a small figure slept peacefully. Riley Martinez looked even younger than her 12 years, petite and delicate with long dark hair pulled into a messy bun, curled up against the window side, an oversized gray hoodie swallowing her small frame. A neck pillow cradled her head. White earbuds were still in her ears, though no music played. To anyone glancing her way, she was just a child, maybe 11, maybe 12 at most, completely lost in the deep sleep that only exhausted kids seem capable of achieving. The flight attendants had smiled warmly when they'd seen her board alone earlier that afternoon. Unaccompanied minor, they'd noted on their passenger manifest, though Riley had politely declined their special assistance with a maturity that surprised them. Still, they'd kept an eye on her the way they always did with young solo travelers. When beverage service came around, they'd let her sleep, whispering to each other that the poor thing must be exhausted from school or dance practice or whatever 12-year-old girls did these days. The businessman in seat 11C, a heavy-set man in his 50s with thinning hair and an expensive suit, had glanced at Riley exactly once when he'd squeezed past her to reach his aisle seat. Teenagers, he'd thought dismissively, though she looked younger than that. Sleep through everything. Then he'd returned to his laptop, fingers flying over the keyboard as he worked on some urgent presentation. In seat 11E, next to the window, an elderly woman named Margaret Chen had smiled at the sleeping girl with genuine warmth. She reminded Margaret of her own granddaughter, that same delicate build, that same peaceful expression of a child deep in dreams. Margaret had even pulled her blanket up a bit when it had slipped, a grandmother's instinct taking over. Nobody noticed anything unusual about Riley Martinez. Nobody gave her a second thought. Just another kid traveling alone, probably visiting divorced parents or going to see grandparents, probably tired from staying up too late texting friends or watching videos on her phone. Completely ordinary, completely harmless, completely, utterly underestimated. The truth was buried so deep in classified military files that most generals didn't know it existed. Riley Martinez was part of Project Talon. The program's existence was denied by every official channel. It didn't appear in any military budget. It operated out of facilities that officially didn't exist, staffed by people whose service records had been scrubbed clean of any mention of their real work. Project Talon was the most secretive aviation program in American military history, and for good reason. The public could never accept what it actually did. It identified children, not teenagers, not young adults, children specifically, with extraordinary neurological gifts, spatial awareness that tested beyond known measurement scales, reaction times so fast they broke standard testing equipment, hand-eye coordination that defied normal human parameters, and, most importantly, psychological profiles showing an unnatural capacity for calm under life-threatening pressure. The program found them young, sometimes as young as 6 or 7, though they never began actual training until age 8. They used standardized testing, video game performance data, school records, even youth sports competitions, casting the widest possible net to find the genetic lottery winners who possessed raw capabilities that no amount of training could create. Riley had been identified at age 7 during a routine school assessment. Her spatial reasoning scores had literally been flagged as impossible by the testing software. A psychologist had been sent to retest her, convinced there had been an error. There hadn't been. Riley could rotate 3-dimensional objects in her mind with perfect accuracy. She could track multiple moving objects simultaneously. Her reaction time to visual stimuli was 120 milliseconds, faster than Olympic athletes, faster than fighter pilots, faster than almost any human ever measured. The recruiter had come to her parents' small apartment in San Antonio 3 months later. He'd been honest, brutally so, telling them what Project Talon was, what it trained children to do, what Riley's life would become if they agreed. He'd been clear about the danger, the secrecy, the sacrifice. He'd also been clear about the alternative. Riley's extraordinary gifts would go to waste, and someday, when a crisis came that her unique capabilities could have solved, people would die because she hadn't been trained. Riley's father had been a Marine. He understood service, sacrifice, duty. Her mother had been a nurse. She understood that sometimes you did hard things to save lives. Together they'd asked Riley, 7 years old, small for her age, with those same dark eyes that now slept peacefully in seat 11D, what she wanted. "Will I get to fly?" Riley had asked, her child's voice full of wonder. "Yes," the recruiter had said. "You'll fly like almost nobody else in the world ever gets to fly. And you could help people, like Daddy helped people. Yes, you could save lives. Many lives." Riley had looked at her parents with that serious expression that sometimes crossed her young face, making her seem older than her years. "Then I want to do it." That had been 5 years ago, 5 years of training that would break most adults. They'd started slowly. Simulator time, physical conditioning appropriate for a child's growing body, psychological preparation. By age 9, Riley was flying basic aircraft in actual cockpits under instructor supervision. By age 10, she was in combat simulators so realistic they included the smell of smoke and the visceral shake of weapons fire. By age 11, she was flying actual military aircraft on training missions. At age 12, she'd flown her first real combat operation. The mission was classified at levels so high that even its existence could never be acknowledged. A special operations team had been pinned down in hostile territory, a place America wasn't officially operating in, doing things America officially didn't do. They'd needed close air support, from a pilot who could fly low, fast, and absolutely perfectly, because there were civilians nearby and the margin for error was measured in meters, not miles. They'd sent Riley. She'd flown an A-10 Thunderbolt II, the ugly, ungainly, brutally effective aircraft known as the Warthog, into a combat zone under enemy fire. She'd executed her attack runs with textbook precision, destroying hostile positions while avoiding civilian structures with accuracy that amazed her ground controllers. The special operations team had lived. The civilians had lived. The enemy combatants had died. Her commanding officer's after-action report had been brief. Hawk executed mission with complete success. 0 friendly casualties, 0 civilian casualties, multiple hostile casualties confirmed. Subject demonstrated 0 panic, perfect tactical judgment, and flying skills. Equivalent to pilots with decades of experience. Age 12, female, neither factor relevant to performance. That was when she'd earned her call sign, Hawk, for the way she saw everything from above, missing nothing, striking with absolute precision. In the 18 months since that first combat mission, Riley had flown 22 more. She'd logged 847 combat flight hours, more than many pilots accumulated in entire careers. She'd flown in hostile airspace over places Americans would never hear about. She'd taken enemy fire and evaded it with maneuvers that pushed aircraft to their limits. She'd made life or death decisions that no 12-year-old should ever have to make, yet she made them with the calm certainty of someone who'd been born for this singular purpose. She'd killed people. Program psychologists watched her carefully for signs of trauma, of breakdown, of the moral injury that combat inflicted even on untrained adult soldiers. But Riley processed it differently than adults did. She understood, with a clarity that troubled some of her counselors, that she was saving innocent lives by taking guilty ones. She grieved for the necessity of violence, but she didn't break under its weight. "She's not a child in the normal sense," one psychologist had written in a classified evaluation. Her emotional age around combat is significantly advanced beyond her chronological age. She processes violence and death with the philosophical understanding of someone much older. Yet she still laughs at silly jokes, still gets excited about ice cream, still cries at sad movies. She's somehow both 12 and ageless simultaneously. Officially, Riley Martinez didn't exist as a military pilot. Her cover identity was airtight. A gifted student in a special advanced education program, one of those genius kids who went to special schools and competed in academic competitions. When she traveled civilian, she had all the documents any other 12-year-old girl would have. School ID, library card, even a social media presence carefully curated to look like any other preteen girl's life, pictures of food, selfies with friends, actually other Project Talon members during downtime, complaints about homework, excitement about new movies. The cover was designed to be completely, utterly ordinary. Nobody looked twice at a small 12-year-old girl. That was exactly how the program wanted it. Hiding in plain sight, their deadliest asset wrapped in the most innocuous package imaginable. Right now, sleeping in seat 11D, with her hoodie pulled up and her small hands tucked under her cheek, Riley looked every bit the part. She'd just returned from a 72-hour classified operation, 3 straight days of mission briefings, simulator updates, and 1 actual combat sortie that had pushed her skills to new limits. She was genuinely exhausted, running on the kind of empty that only sustained high-stress operations could create. They'd put her on this civilian flight immediately after mission debriefing, flying her back to San Antonio for a mandatory 14-day rest period with her cover family, standard protocol. Even the extraordinary needed downtime, especially when they were still growing children whose bodies required more recovery than adults. She'd fallen asleep before the plane had even finished boarding and hadn't stirred since, dead to the world in that complete way that only exhausted 12-year-olds slept. Her small frame and young face made her look even more harmless than usual. The oversized hoodie hid what little athletic build she had. Her delicate features, still carrying hints of childhood softness, made her look more like 10 than 12. Nobody could ever imagine that this sleeping child had more combat experience than most veteran pilots, that those small hands had flown aircraft into battle, that this little girl had looked through targeting systems and made the conscious choice to end human lives in service of protecting innocent ones. The businessman in 11C tapped away at his laptop, completely unaware that the sleeping kid next to him had killed more people than most soldiers ever would. The elderly woman in 11E dozed off herself, completely unaware that the girl she'd tucked the blanket around was one of the most lethal pilots in American military service. The flight attendants checked on passengers, completely unaware that the unaccompanied minor in the middle of row 11 could fly this 777 better than the 2 pilots up front. Riley slept on, peaceful and small and utterly underestimated. Then everything changed. The first indication something was wrong came as a subtle vibration through the aircraft, so slight that most passengers didn't notice it. In the cockpit, Captain James Morrison frowned at his instruments. He was 53, with 28 years of commercial flying experience, more than 19,000 hours in the air, and a reputation as one of American Airlines' most unflappable pilots. He'd landed planes in crosswinds that would terrify lesser pilots, handled medical emergencies and unruly passengers and mechanical problems with textbook calm. But he'd never seen anything like what appeared on his radar display now. "What the hell is that?" he said, his voice tight with confusion. Co-pilot Sarah Chen leaned forward, her 38-year-old eyes narrowing at the screen. "Multiple contacts. Fast movers. Very fast." Captain Morrison's hands moved across his controls, cycling through different radar modes. The contacts remained clear and undeniable. 3 aircraft. No, not aircraft. The radar signature was wrong. Too small, too agile. "Those are drones." "Can't be," Sarah said, her voice rising slightly. "Not out here, not at this altitude. Commercial drones don't." The radio crackled. "American 633, Los Angeles Center. We show unidentified contacts converging on your position. Can you confirm?" Captain Morrison keyed his mic, keeping his voice professional despite the ice forming in his gut. "LA Center, American 633. We confirm 3 contacts closing fast. Can you identify?" A pause. Too long of a pause. When the controller came back, his voice had changed. There was an edge to it now, something that made Morrison's stomach drop. "American 633, be advised, we are identifying those contacts as unmanned combat aerial vehicles, military grade. We are scrambling interceptors, but they are 15 minutes out. You need to take evasive action immediately." Sarah's face went pale. "Combat drones? That's impossible. How would?" An alarm shrieked through the cockpit. Morrison's eyes snapped to the threat receiver, a system commercial aircraft had but which almost never activated, a holdover from post-9/11 security upgrades that everyone hoped would stay silent forever. It was screaming now. "Missile lock." The words appeared in angry red letters across multiple displays. Targeting radar had locked onto their aircraft. Somewhere out there in the clear Nevada sky, at 37,000 feet, hostile drones were preparing to fire weapons at a civilian airliner carrying 289 innocent people. "Oh God," Sarah whispered. They're going to shoot us down. Captain Morrison's hands trembled as they gripped the controls. In 28 years, through everything he'd experienced, he'd never faced anything like this. He'd never trained for this. Commercial pilots didn't train for combat, didn't learn evasive maneuvers, didn't study how to dodge missiles. He knew how to fly a plane smoothly and safely by the book. He had absolutely no idea how to save everyone from military weapons. The radar showed the drones closing. 30 miles, 25, coming in fast and aggressive, their approach profile showing hostile intent that couldn't be mistaken for anything else. This wasn't a mistake, wasn't confused identification. Someone, some terrorist group or rogue nation or impossible threat, had sent military drones to destroy a civilian aircraft. LA Center, American 633, Morrison's voice cracked slightly, those drones are locking weapons on us. What do we do? American 633, military assets are en route, 15 minutes to intercept. You need to execute evasive maneuvers. I don't know combat maneuvers. I'm a commercial pilot. I don't. The threat receiver's pitch changed, became more urgent. Advanced warning. Missile launch imminent. Maybe 90 seconds before those drones fired. 90 seconds before air-to-air missiles streaked toward his aircraft at supersonic speed. Before 289 people died in a fireball of metal and jet fuel and shattered dreams. Morrison made a decision born of complete desperation. He grabbed the PA microphone with shaking hands. His voice, broadcast throughout the cabin, trembled with barely controlled terror. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Morrison. We are under attack by hostile aircraft. This is not a drill. We are being targeted by military drones that will fire on us within the next 90 seconds. I need immediate help. Is there anyone on board with military fighter pilot experience? Anyone who has flown combat aircraft? Please, if you have any combat flight training, I need you in the cockpit right now. The effect in the cabin was immediate and catastrophic. Screams erupted from every direction. A woman shrieked. A man shouted, "Oh God, oh God, oh God," over and over. Children began crying. Not the whining cry of boredom but the terrified wail of kids who understood something terrible was happening. Parents grabbed their children, holding them tight as if love could shield them from missiles. The businessman in seat 11C dropped his laptop. It clattered to the floor, screen shattering, but he didn't notice, his hands shaking as he pulled out his phone, trying to call his wife, needing to hear her voice one more time. The elderly woman in 11E began praying in Cantonese, rapid whispered words to ancestors and gods, her wrinkled hands clutched around a jade pendant at her throat. Flight attendants froze mid-aisle, their training completely inadequate for this scenario. How do you calm passengers when death is actually coming? What safety procedure exists for a military attack? In seat 11D, Riley Martinez's eyes snapped open. For 3 heartbeats she didn't move, just listened, processed. The captain's announcement, hostile aircraft, under attack, missile lock, 90 seconds, need combat pilot. Her mind, trained for 5 years to shift from civilian to warrior in an instant, clicked over like a switch being thrown. The exhausted 12-year-old girl vanished. What remained was Hawk, lieutenant, pilot, weapon. Riley's hands moved with practiced efficiency. She pulled off her hoodie, removed her earbuds and shoved them in her pocket, reached back and tightened her messy bun into a tactical ponytail, hair secure, nothing to obstruct vision or get caught in equipment. All of this in less than 5 seconds, her movements economical and precise. The businessman next to her was sobbing now, pressing his phone to his ear, saying, "Amy, honey, I love you, I love the kids, I just want you to know." The elderly woman had her eyes closed, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks, still praying. Neither of them noticed that the small 12-year-old girl between them had changed. Her posture was different now, straight, alert, ready. Her face had lost all traces of sleepy softness, replaced by something focused and lethal. Her dark eyes scanned the cabin with tactical awareness, assessing, calculating. Riley unbuckled her seat belt and stood. She was tiny, even for 12, barely 5 feet tall, maybe 90 pounds soaking wet, her frame delicate enough that she looked more like 10. Standing in the aisle amid panicking adults, she looked like a lost child, insignificant and helpless, until you looked at her eyes. A flight attendant, a young man named Marcus, barely into his 20s, face white with terror, rushed past, not even seeing her in the chaos. Riley reached out and caught his arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Sir, I need to get to the cockpit." Marcus barely glanced at her, trying to pull away. "Sit down, sweetie, everyone needs to stay, I'm Hawk." Her voice cut through his panic like a blade, not loud, but carrying authority that didn't match her appearance. "Project Talon, authorization code Tango Alpha 79er Lima. I'm the combat pilot the captain needs." Marcus stopped, stared at this tiny 12-year-old girl. "You're what?" "Classified military pilot program. I have 847 combat flight hours, including 22 real combat operations. I can save this aircraft." Riley's dark eyes locked onto his, and something in that gaze, something ancient and certain and absolutely unwavering, made him believe her despite every logical objection his mind was screaming. "Sir, we have approximately 70 seconds before those drones fire missiles that will kill everyone on this plane. I can stop that from happening. But I need you to get me to the cockpit right now." Training took over. Marcus nodded. "Follow me." They pushed through the panicking passengers. People grabbed at Marcus, shouting questions. "What's happening? Are we going to die? Do something." But he kept moving, clearing a path. Some passengers noticed Riley following him and shouted their own confusion. "Why is that kid going to the front? That's just a little girl. Send her back to her seat." None of them understood. How could they? They saw what everyone always saw. A small, delicate child, someone who needed protection, someone helpless. They couldn't see the hundreds of hours in combat simulators, the real missions flown in hostile airspace, the lives saved and enemies killed. They couldn't see that this tiny 12-year-old girl had done things that would give most of them nightmares for life. They couldn't see that she was their only chance of survival. Marcus reached the cockpit door and pounded on it. "Captain, I have someone." The door flew open. Captain Morrison stood there, face gray with terror and desperate hope. His eyes swept past Marcus, found Riley, and his expression collapsed into despair. "What? No, that's a child. We need a pilot. We need, sir." Riley's voice cut through his rising panic, sharp and military crisp. "Lieutenant Riley Martinez, call sign Hawk, Classified Combat Aviation Program. I have 847 flight hours, 22 combat operations, including 11 missions in hostile airspace with active enemy fire. Check with NORAD Command, they'll confirm my credentials. Authorization code Tango Alpha 79er Lima." Morrison stared at her. 12 years old, couldn't weigh more than 90 pounds, looked like she should be in 6th grade worrying about homework and boys and which emoji to use. "You're insane, you're a kid having some kind." Behind him, Sarah Chen was staring at the threat receiver. "Captain, missile launch countdown detected. 61 seconds. The number appeared on the displays in angry red. 60, 59. Riley stepped into the cockpit, her small frame barely filling the doorway, but her presence somehow larger than her size. "Captain Morrison, I understand how this looks. I know I'm 12. I know I look like a little girl. But the people who trained me, the people who sent me on real combat missions, they didn't care about my age or my gender. They cared that I could fly. And right now, that's all that matters. Sir, I can save everyone on this aircraft, but you need to give me control right now." The radio crackled, a new voice on a different frequency, a military channel that should have been encrypted but which LA Center had patched through in desperation. "American 633, this is Eagle Lead, F-15 Strike Eagle scrambling from Nellis Air Force Base. We are 12 minutes out. Do you have anyone aboard with evasive training? You have less than a minute before those drones fire. 50 seconds. Morrison's hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the radio. "Eagle Lead, I have someone claiming to be military, call sign Hawk, but she's Hawk." The F-15 pilot's voice exploded with shock. "Hawk from Project Talon. Why, yes, but Captain, listen to me very carefully. Put Hawk on the controls right now. We know her. We've studied her operations. If Hawk is on your aircraft, she's your only chance. Put her on now." 40 seconds. Morrison turned to Riley, this tiny 12-year-old girl who claimed she could do the impossible. His mind rebelled against it, rejected it, screamed that this was insane. But the F-15 pilot's voice had been certain, and the countdown was at 38 seconds now, 37, 36. He made the impossible choice. "Take the co-pilot seat," he said, his voice breaking. Riley moved with fluid speed, sliding past Sarah, who scrambled out of the right-hand seat. Riley settled into it, her small frame almost comically inadequate for the large pilot's chair, her feet barely reaching the rudder pedals, but her hands found the controls with absolute certainty, muscle memory taking over, positioning on throttles and stick with textbook precision. She keyed the radio. "Eagle lead, this is Hawk. I'm aboard American 633, taking tactical control." A pause, then, "Hawk, Eagle led. Good to have you in the fight. What do you need?" "Time," Eagle led. "Keep those drones busy when you arrive. I'll keep everyone alive until then." "Roger that, Hawk. Don't do anything crazy." Riley allowed herself the ghost of a smile, grim and tight, nothing like a child's smile. "No promises," Eagle led. 30 seconds. Riley's hands moved over the controls with practiced speed, those small 12-year-old hands that still looked like they should be holding crayons or video game controllers, now managing systems that most adults couldn't even name. "Captain, I need you on throttle management when I call for it." "Co-pilot," she glanced at Sarah, who stood frozen by the wall. "I need you on systems monitoring, call out any warnings. Both of you follow my commands exactly, no questions, no hesitation. I know this looks wrong, but trust me, I've done this before." 25 seconds. The missiles launched on radar. Two bright contacts separated from the feet per second, advanced air-to-air missiles designed to destroy military fighter jets, now targeted at a civilian 777 filled with innocent people. 20 seconds. Riley's hands tightened on the controls. Her voice remained absolutely calm, and that was perhaps the most unsettling thing about it, the way this 12-year-old girl spoke with the cool certainty of a veteran combat pilot watching death approach. "Captain, when I call for throttle, I need you to cut engines 2 and 3 to idle, keep 1 and 4 at full power. Understand? That's not standard procedure for, I know. Do it anyway." 15 seconds. Riley banked the aircraft sharply left. Not a gentle commercial turn but an aggressive combat maneuver, pushing the 777's airframe toward limits it wasn't designed for, but which she knew, from hundreds of hours studying aircraft performance envelopes, it could withstand. The massive plane tilted, groaning under stress, passengers screaming as the world tilted sideways. The missiles adjusted their track. Still locked, still closing. 12 seconds. Throttle now. Engines 2 and 3 to idle. Morrison's hands moved, following her command despite every instinct screaming that this was wrong. The Boeing shuddered as 2 of its 4 engines cut back, creating asymmetric thrust that wanted to spin the aircraft. Riley compensated instantly, her small hands dancing over the controls, using rudder and aileron to maintain controlled flight while the aircraft performed maneuvers that should have been impossible. She rolled the 777, actually rolled it, rotating the massive aircraft along its longitudinal axis like a fighter jet, something commercial pilots never did, something passengers would never experience in normal flight. The cabin became chaos. People screamed. Bags fell from overhead compartments. A flight attendant lost her grip and slid down the tilted aisle. But the missile's targeting computer lost its lock for a precious second, sensors confused by the unexpected maneuver from a commercial aircraft. 8 seconds. Riley leveled out, then immediately dove into an aggressive, steep descent, using gravity and mass, dropping the aircraft toward the desert below at rates that made the altimeter spin like a clock face. The missiles reacquired lock, but their angle was wrong now, their approach vector no longer optimal. 5 seconds. Full power. All engines, now. Morrison slammed the throttles forward. All 4 engines roared to maximum thrust. The Boeing surged forward, accelerating impossibly for an aircraft this size at this altitude. 3 seconds. Riley pulled up hard, not gradually but with aggressive force that pushed the airframe to its stress limits. The nose came up, up, the aircraft climbing steeply, too steeply. Forces built. 1.5 Gs, 2 Gs, more than commercial aircraft ever experienced, more than passengers ever felt outside of crashes. People screamed. The businessman in 11C blacked out from the G-force, slumping in his seat. But the elderly woman in 11E gripped her armrests and whispered, "Save us, little angel, save us." The missile streaked through the space where the 777 had been 1 second earlier. They missed by 287 feet. The warheads detonated at their programmed altitude, turning the empty sky into a bloom of fire and shrapnel. But American Flight 633 was already above them, climbing hard, Riley's impossible maneuver having bought them survival by a margin measured in heartbeats. Sarah Chen stared at the radar showing the explosion below them, her voice shaking. "You did it. Oh my God, you actually, not done." Riley's hands never stopped moving, never paused. She leveled the aircraft, then immediately began a defensive flight pattern, constantly changing altitude, heading, speed, never staying predictable, never giving the drones an easy targeting solution. "They've got more missiles. And we've got." She glanced at the threat display, 11 minutes before the F-15s arrive. "Captain, how's the airframe?" Morrison checked his instruments, his hands still trembling but functioning on autopilot now. "Stress warnings on multiple systems. We're operating outside normal flight envelope, but no critical damage." "How did you?" "Training." Riley's voice was matter of fact, almost casual, as if she hadn't just saved 289 lives with flying that shouldn't have been possible. "I've done this in simulators thousands of times. Done it for real a dozen times in actual combat. The 777's tougher than people think. Built with safety margins. I'm using those margins." The drones closed again, more aggressive now, adapting to her tactics. Riley watched their approach on radar, her 12-year-old mind processing angles, speeds, weapons ranges, calculating a dozen variables simultaneously. "Second missile launch," Sarah called out. 2 more missiles, different approach angle. 10 minutes until the F-15s arrive. Riley's hands moved through another set of impossible maneuvers, rolling the massive aircraft, diving, climbing, using the 777 like a fighter jet in ways the Boeing engineers who designed it never imagined. She burned fuel recklessly, pushed engines past their nominal limits, stressed the airframe repeatedly, but she kept the missiles away, kept everyone alive. A third launch, a fourth. The drones were persistent, firing every missile in their arsenal, trying to overwhelm her with multiple threats. Riley defeated them all. She was a tiny 12-year-old girl in an oversized pilot's seat, feet barely reaching the pedals, small hands looking almost comical on the massive controls, but she flew with the precision of a master, with instincts honed over 5 years of training that compressed decades of experience into a childhood that should have been filled with different things. The businessman in 11C regained consciousness and threw up, his stomach rebelling against the G-forces and maneuvers. The elderly woman in 11E kept praying, adding, "Thank you now," along with her, "Please." Throughout the cabin, people cried and held each other and tried to understand how they were still alive. 8 minutes, 6 minutes, 4 minutes. Riley kept flying, kept evading, kept everyone breathing. 2 minutes. Eagle lead. "Hawk, what's your ETA?" 90 seconds. "Hawk, we have the drones on radar. You've done great, kid. Hold on just a little longer." "Copy that." Eagle lead. Riley's voice cut off as an alarm shrieked. "I've got another missile launch. But this one was different. Close range, no time for elaborate maneuvers." The drone had waited, learned her patterns, fired from a position that gave her almost no reaction time. 30 seconds to impact. Riley's mind calculated trajectories instantly. The missile was coming from below and behind, rising at a steep angle. Most of her defensive maneuvers required altitude and space to work. She didn't have either. She made a decision she knew the Aviation Safety Board would call reckless if they ever found out. But the Aviation Safety Board wasn't here. "Captain, full throttle, all engines. Copilot, watch for compressor stalls." Morrison slammed the throttles forward. The engines screamed, pouring maximum power. Riley simultaneously rolled the aircraft inverted, completely upside down, a 777 flying on its back, and pulled the stick, using the inverted orientation to force the aircraft into a dive that used both gravity and thrust. The 777 accelerated downward while upside down, its belly facing the sky, performing a maneuver that commercial aircraft simply didn't do, that shouldn't have been possible, that every regulation and procedure said was impossible. But Riley had done it in simulators. She knew the airframe could handle it. For a few seconds, the missile tracking from below suddenly found its target had reversed position. The targeting computer tried to adjust, but physics was unforgiving. The missile's engine couldn't make the impossible turn in time. It streaked past, missing by less than 100 feet, close enough that the radar proximity fuse nearly detonated it. Riley rolled the aircraft back upright, pulled out of the dive, and leveled at 34,000 feet. 20 seconds later, the F-15s arrived. They came in fast and lethal, 2 Strike Eagles with full air-to-air loadouts, pilots who'd trained their entire adult lives for combat. Against them, the drones stood no chance. Splash 1 came over the radio as the first drone exploded. Splash 2, Splash 3, all hostiles destroyed. American 633, you are clear. Nice flying, Hawk. Remind us never to get in a dogfight with you. Riley allowed herself a full breath for the first time in 11 minutes. Thank you, Eagle led. Appreciate the backup. She looked at Captain Morrison. Her small hands were still steady on the controls, but she could feel the adrenaline starting to fade, the crash beginning. Captain, aircraft is yours. Threat neutralized. Recommend we maintain alert status until landing, but immediate danger has passed. Morrison stared at her, this 12-year-old girl who had just saved everyone, who had flown a civilian airliner like a combat aircraft, who had defeated military weapons through skill that seemed impossible, who had done things the best commercial pilots in the world couldn't do. Who? His voice cracked. What are you? Riley unbuckled, standing on legs that were starting to shake now that combat mode was fading. She looked up at him. She had to look up. She was so much smaller than him, and for a moment she looked like a regular 12-year-old again. Tired, young, vulnerable. I'm exactly what the military trained me to be, sir. I've been training since I was 7 years old, every day, every hour I wasn't in school. Simulators, real flights, combat scenarios. They train me for situations that shouldn't exist. And today, she glanced toward the cabin, toward the 288 passengers who were crying and holding each other, alive because of her. Today all that training mattered. Sarah Chen was crying, tears streaming down her face. You're 12 years old, you're just a baby, and you saved all of us. Riley's expression was complicated. Part pride, part weariness, part something sad that no 12-year-old should have to feel. I'm Lieutenant Martinez, ma'am. Age doesn't define capability. Training does. Dedication does. And when you start that training young enough, she trailed off. Morrison reached out and then hesitated, not sure if he should hug this child or salute her or what. I owe you my life. Everyone on this plane owes you their life. You don't owe me anything, sir. I just did my job. Riley moved toward the cockpit door, suddenly desperate to be away from their staring, from their gratitude, from the weight of being seen. I should return to my seat. Let you fly this plane properly into L.A. She slipped out of the cockpit, walking back through the cabin on shaking legs. The passengers stared at her as she passed. Word had spread somehow, whispered through the chaos, that the tiny girl from seat 11D had somehow saved them. People reached out to touch her shoulder, her hand, crying and thanking her. The businessman from 11C grabbed her in a hug that lifted her small frame off the ground, sobbing into her oversized hoodie. The elderly woman from 11E took Riley's small hand in her weathered ones and pressed it to her forehead, blessing her in Cantonese, calling her a guardian spirit. Riley didn't know what to say. She just nodded, said quiet thank yous, tried to smile, tried to be normal, tried to be just a 12-year-old girl again. When she finally reached seat 11D and collapsed into it, pulling her hoodie back on and curling up small, she closed her eyes and felt the tears come. Not tears of fear. She hadn't been afraid during the combat, her training had burned fear away years ago, but tears of exhaustion, of relief, of the crushing weight of responsibility that came with carrying 289 lives through 11 minutes of hell. She was 12 years old. She had just saved everyone, and she was so tired. The landing in Los Angeles was surreal. Emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft. Fire trucks, ambulances, police, but also military vehicles, black SUVs with government plates. Riley saw them through her window and knew what they meant. Project Talon was about to become public. The hostile attack on a civilian aircraft, defeated by a classified pilot program, couldn't be covered up. Too many witnesses, Too many air traffic controllers who'd heard the radio chatter, too many F-15 pilots who'd reported what happened. The truth was going to come out, and the military knew it. As passengers were evacuated, Riley was immediately separated. Two men in dark suits appeared at her seat. "Lieutenant Martinez, please come with us." She nodded, following them off the aircraft through a jetway that had been cleared of other passengers. The businessman from 11C called after her, "Wait, what's her name? I want to thank her properly." One of the suits answered without breaking stride, "That information is classified." They took Riley to a secure room in the terminal where a full team waited: military officers, intelligence personnel, even a lawyer. A woman in an army colonel's uniform stepped forward, her face serious but not unkind. "Hawk, you did good up there. Saved everyone. But the situation is complicated now. The attack is going to be major news. Your involvement will come out. We need to decide how to handle this." Riley, sitting in a chair too big for her, legs dangling above the floor, nodded. "They're going to declassify Project Talon, partially. We can't hide it anymore, not after this." The colonel sat across from her. "The world is about to learn that 12-year-old combat pilots exist. Some people will call it heroic. Others will call it child abuse. It's going to be ugly. Are you ready for that?" Riley thought about it, thought about the training that had consumed her childhood, the combat she'd seen, the lives she'd saved that day. "Ma'am, I'm not sure anyone can be ready for that. But I wouldn't change what I did. I saved 289 people today. That matters more than what anyone thinks about how old I am." The colonel smiled slightly, spoken like a true soldier. "Your parents are being notified. They'll be here in a few hours. Until then, you're staying in protective custody. Media is already going crazy. Mysterious hero saves flight, but they don't have details yet." That won't last. It didn't. By the next morning, the story had exploded across every news outlet in the world. The attack itself was shocking enough. Drones attacking a civilian aircraft over American soil suggested terrorism or worse, but the hero's story was what captivated everyone. At first the reports just said, "Classified military pilot aboard flight," but then details leaked. Someone, probably one of the F-15 pilots, mentioned the call sign Hawk. Military watchers knew that call sign, knew it belonged to Project Talon, and someone leaked that Talon pilots were adolescents. Then passengers started talking, posting on social media. The businessman from 11C posted, "A little girl saved us. I sat next to her. She looked maybe 12. She flew that plane like nothing I've ever seen. I don't understand how, but she saved my life." The elderly woman from 11E did an interview, "The tiniest angel. Small and delicate like my granddaughter, but she flew with such strength, such courage. Age means nothing when God gives such gifts." More passengers confirmed it. Flight attendants confirmed it. The captain himself, in a statement released by American Airlines, said, "A 12-year-old girl, Lieutenant Riley Martinez, saved everyone aboard my aircraft with flying skills that exceed anything I've seen in my 28-year career." The world lost its collective mind. How could a 12-year-old be a military pilot? How could a child have combat experience? The ethical debate started immediately and viciously. Child welfare advocates called it abuse, exploitation, called for investigations and prosecutions. Military supporters called it necessary, called Riley a hero, pointed to the 289 lives saved as justification for the program. The government tried to control the narrative with a press conference at the Pentagon. The Secretary of Defense stood at the podium, flanked by generals, and explained what they could without revealing everything classified. Project Talon identifies children with extraordinary neurological capabilities, reaction times, spatial awareness, and psychological profiles that occur in perhaps 1 in 10 million individuals. These are genetic lottery winners, born with capabilities that no amount of training can create in someone who doesn't naturally possess them. Reporters shouted questions. The secretary raised his hand for quiet. "We train these individuals from a young age because these capabilities, paradoxically, are strongest in youth and fade somewhat in adulthood. The neuroplasticity of the developing brain allows integration of combat instincts in ways adult brains cannot achieve. We don't take every child. We identify those so rare that turning away from their potential would be the greater moral failure." More shouting. The secretary's expression became serious. Lieutenant Riley Martinez is 12 years old. She is female. She has logged 847 combat flight hours over the past 4 years, including 22 actual combat operations in defense of this nation. Yesterday she saved 289 civilian lives using skills that took 5 years of intense training to develop. I understand the ethical concerns. I share some of them, but I also understand this. If Riley Martinez hadn't been on that aircraft, you'd be asking me to explain 289 deaths instead. He paused, letting that sink in. The passengers of Flight 633 are alive because we trained a girl who volunteered, who chose this path with her parents' support, who dedicated her childhood to service when she could have been playing video games or worrying about middle school dances. She made that sacrifice. She earned that capability. And yesterday, it saved lives. But the debate didn't stop, it intensified. Cable news filled with arguing heads. Some defended the program passionately, pointing to Riley's success as proof the training worked, that sometimes extraordinary measures were justified. Others attacked it just as passionately, arguing that 12-year-olds couldn't truly consent to military service, that training children for combat violated their humanity regardless of the results. Child psychologists weighed in, arguing both sides, some saying the training would cause permanent psychological damage, others, after examining Riley and other Talon members, admitting with surprise that the subjects seemed remarkably well adjusted, showing less combat trauma than many adult soldiers despite more exposure. Religious leaders debated whether using child soldiers was ever moral. Some quoted biblical figures who accomplished great things young, others condemned it as a violation of childhood innocence. Through it all, Riley stayed in protective custody. The military kept her away from cameras, from reporters who would have swarmed her. They brought her parents too. Her father looking proud and worried in equal measure, her mother crying and hugging her tiny daughter who'd done something impossible. 1 week after the incident, the military made a carefully planned exception to their media blackout, arranging for some of the passengers from Flight 633 to meet Riley privately, with just one camera crew present to record it for later release. The businessman from 11C, whose name was David Chen, broke down crying when he saw her. "I thought you were just a kid, just some girl sleeping, and you saved everyone. You saved my life. I have 3 daughters at home who still have a father because of you." He hugged her, this large middle-aged man and this tiny 12-year-old girl, both of them crying. The elderly woman from 11E, Margaret Chen, no relation to David, held Riley's small hands in her weathered ones and blessed her again, in English this time. "You are special, touched by heaven. Whatever they did to train you, however hard it was, today I thank God they did it. You are a hero, little one, a true hero." A mother who'd been on the flight with her 8-year-old son brought the boy to meet Riley. The child stared up at her with wide eyes. To him, 12 seemed impossibly old and mature. "You saved me," he asked. Riley knelt down so they were at eye level. "I did my best, and it worked. You're okay now. When I grow up, can I be like you?" Riley's expression became complicated. She looked at the camera, then back at the boy. "If you have the gift, if you're one of the special ones, and if you're willing to work harder than anything you've ever imagined, then maybe. But it's not an easy path. It takes everything. You're brave," the boy said simply. Riley smiled, a real smile this time, and ruffled his hair. "So are you. You stayed calm on that plane. That took courage, too." One by one, the passengers thanked her. Some hugged her, some cried, all of them tried to express gratitude that language couldn't really hold. The gratitude of people given their lives back when they'd been certain those lives were ending. Through it all, Riley remained composed, polite, humble, but exhausted too. The weight of all this attention, all this praise, was in some ways harder than the combat had been. 3 months later, after intensive debate, multiple congressional hearings, and a nationwide controversy that refused to die down, Riley Martinez was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor in a ceremony at the White House. She was the youngest recipient in history, the youngest female recipient ever, the first active pilot from a classified program to receive it. The president herself placed the medal around Riley's neck. The blue ribbon and gold star rested against Riley's chest, looking almost too heavy for her small frame. She wore her dress uniform, specially tailored for her small size, and stood at attention with perfect military bearing despite being barely 5 feet tall. The citation read by the president was heavily redacted. Most of Riley's operations remained classified, but the core was clear: for conspicuous gallantry and extraordinary heroism while saving the lives of 289 civilians during hostile action against American Airlines Flight 633. Lieutenant Martinez, with complete disregard for her own safety, demonstrating aerial combat skills of the highest order, defeated a sustained military attack on a civilian aircraft through 12 minutes of defensive flying that aviation experts have termed impossible. Her actions reflect the highest credit upon herself and the United States military. The audience, packed with military brass, politicians, journalists, and crucially many of the passengers from Flight 633, rose in a standing ovation. They clapped until their hands hurt, many crying openly. At the reception afterward, a reporter managed to get close enough to ask Riley a question. "Lieutenant Martinez, what do you say to critics who still call Project Talon child exploitation?" Riley paused. She'd been coached by handlers on how to answer this, but in the moment she abandoned the prepared response and spoke from her heart. "I say they weren't on Flight 633. 289 people went home to their families because I trained instead of doing normal kid things, because I spent 5 years learning to fly when I could have been hanging out with friends or playing sports or doing whatever normal 12-year-olds do. I made that choice. My parents supported that choice. And yesterday, she caught herself. 3 months ago, that choice saved lives." She looked directly at the camera, her young face serious, her dark eyes holding wisdom that shouldn't exist at 12. "I won't tell you it's been easy. I won't tell you I haven't missed parts of normal childhood. But I also won't tell you I regret it, because I know what I am. I know what I can do. And when people needed someone who could do impossible things, I was there. That matters more than anything else." Another reporter shouted, "Do you think more children should be trained for combat?" "No," Riley said firmly. "Not more children, only the right children. The ones born with gifts so rare that wasting those gifts would be worse than training them. We're not talking about average kids. We're talking about maybe 1 in millions who can do what we do. For everyone else, they should have normal childhoods. But for those special few," she paused, "for us, the training is the only way we can become who we're meant to be." A third reporter asked, "Are you still flying?" Riley smiled slightly, and for just a moment she looked like a regular 12-year-old about to share a secret. "I can't comment on current operations. But I can tell you this: I'm a pilot. That's who I am. It's not something you stop being." 6 months after Flight 633, Riley returned to active duty with Project Talon. The program had been partially declassified. Now the public knew it existed. Congressional oversight had been established. Psychologists monitored the young pilots constantly. Rules had been updated, some made more strict, others surprisingly loosened after experts realized the training was actually less harmful than many traditional military programs. But the core remained: identifying children with impossible gifts and training them to save lives. Riley walked into the training facility where she'd spent half her life. Her instructor, Colonel Sarah Reeves, a 42-year-old former combat pilot who'd taken over the program after her own distinguished career, waited for her. "Welcome back, Hawk. You're famous now. World knows what we do. How's it feel?" Riley thought about it. "Weird, ma'am. I just wanted to train and fly. Now there are documentaries about me, kids dress up as me for Halloween. It's uncomfortable." "Yes, ma'am. I'm not a superhero. I'm just a pilot who got lucky to be in the right place." Colonel Reeves smiled. "Wrong. You're a pilot who worked for 5 years to be ready for that right place. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity. You prepared. The opportunity came. That's not luck, that's earned capability." "Maybe." Riley looked around the familiar facility, the simulators, the briefing rooms, the hangars. "Home. Ma'am, there are protesters outside, people saying we're child soldiers, that this should be shut down. Do you think we're doing the right thing?" Reeves was quiet for a moment. "Riley, I've been doing this for 3 years now. I've seen what we do. I've seen kids like you transform into pilots who can do things I can't do despite 20 years more experience. And I've seen what happens when those pilots put their skills to use. You saved 289 people. Another Talon pilot. You don't know her. She's still classified. Saved a hostage situation last year that would have been a massacre. These aren't hypotheticals. These are real lives saved by real skills that took real training. She looked Riley in the eyes. So yes, I think we're doing the right thing. Will I tell you it's easy? No. Will I tell you there aren't costs? No. But I will tell you that the alternative, letting your gifts go untrained, letting situations happen where you could have helped but weren't ready, that would be worse. Riley nodded slowly. They're talking about expanding the program, trying to find more kids like us. They are. And they'll be very careful. We learned a lot from training you and the others. We know what works, what doesn't, what to watch for. Future classes will benefit from that knowledge. Will they resent us, the new kids, for making them famous before they're ready? Reeves laughed softly. Hawk, they'll idolize you. You're proof that this works, that they're not crazy for volunteering, that the sacrifice means something. You're their hero. I don't want to be anyone's hero, ma'am. I just want to fly. Then fly. Reeves handed Riley her flight gear. You've been on mandatory rest for 6 months. Time to get back in the cockpit. I've got a sim scenario ready for you, advanced combat against multiple hostiles. Let's see if you're rusty. Riley took the gear, feeling the familiar weight of helmet and harness. She smiled. 12 years old, a child by most measures, but in this moment feeling more herself than she had in 6 months of public appearances and interviews. I'm not rusty, ma'am. I'm ready. The simulator session went perfectly. Riley flew like she always did, with preternatural calm, impossible precision, making decisions that somehow always turned out to be exactly right. When she climbed out of the cockpit an hour later, Reeves was shaking her head in amazement. 847 hours before flight 633. You're over 900 now with the training you did before the award ceremony, and somehow you're still getting better. How? Riley shrugged, pulling off her helmet, her hair tumbling loose, still long, still dark, still making her look younger than her 12 years. It's not me, ma'am, it's the training. You taught me well. We taught you the basics. The rest, that's all you, Hawk. That's the gift you were born with. Later, in the pilot's lounge, Riley sat with 3 other Talon members, 2 boys, aged 13 and 14, and another girl, aged 11, who was newer to the program. They looked up to Riley now, the famous one, the hero, but she treated them like equals, talking tactics, comparing simulator scores, making jokes about instructors. The 11-year-old girl, call sign Sparrow, asked quietly, "Do you think I'll be good enough when something real happens?" Riley looked at her, remembering being that age, remembering the doubt that crept in sometimes. "Are you training every day? Are you learning?" "I think so." "Then you'll be ready. The training works, Sparrow. I promise you, when the moment comes, everything you learned will be there. Your hands will know what to do. Your mind will be calm. You'll save people." Riley smiled. "And then you'll be terrified afterward when you realize what you just did. But you'll have saved them. That's what matters." Sparrow nodded, looking reassured. One of the boys mentioned that the president wanted to meet the whole program, all of them, a photo op thing. Riley groaned. "More cameras, more interviews. I just want to fly. You're the face of the program now," he said. "We all kind of live in your shadow." "Don't," Riley said firmly. "Each of you is here because you have the same gift I do. Maybe different strengths, different styles, but the same core capability. You're not in my shadow, you're beside me. We're all just pilots doing our job." But she knew it wasn't that simple. The world saw her differently now, saw all of them differently. Project Talon wasn't secret anymore, it was controversial, debated, analyzed. Every decision they made, every mission they flew, would be scrutinized in ways previous generations of warriors never faced. And Riley was the symbol of all of it, the 12-year-old girl who'd done the impossible. 1 year after Flight 633, an independent documentary film crew was granted limited access to Project Talon. They spent 3 months filming, interviewing, trying to understand how children became combat pilots. The resulting documentary, Born to Fly: The Truth About Project Talon, became one of the most watched films of the decade. It showed everything. The identification process that found potential members, the training that developed them, the psychological monitoring that ensured their well-being, the actual pilots living their daily lives. And it showed Riley. The most powerful sequence came when they filmed Riley in her family home in San Antonio during one of her rest periods. Her bedroom was a strange mixture. Flight manuals and tactical studies on one shelf, stuffed animals and young adult novels on another, a poster of fighter jets on one wall, a poster of a boy band on the opposite wall, her Congressional Medal of Honor displayed on her desk next to a participation trophy from elementary school soccer. The interviewer asked, "Do you ever wish you could have had a normal childhood?" Riley, sitting cross-legged on her bed in pajamas, looking more 10 than 13 now, thought carefully. "Sometimes, when I see other kids my age hanging out at the mall or talking about dances or whatever, part of me wonders what that would be like. But then I remember Flight 633. I remember the faces of those passengers. I remember that I saved 289 people." She looked directly at the camera. A normal childhood would have meant those people died. So no, I don't wish I'd had a different childhood. I wish the world didn't need pilots like me. I wish there were no terrorists, no hostile drones, no situations where someone has to make the impossible possible. But that's not the world we live in. And in this world, I'm glad I trained. I'm glad I can help. The interviewer asked, "What do you want people to know about Project Talon?" Riley's answer became the most quoted line from the entire film. "I want them to know we're not victims. We're not exploited children or child soldiers or any of those things people call us. We're volunteers. We chose this. We train hard because we want to, because we can, because we're good at it. And when the moment comes when someone needs help that only we can provide, we're ready. That's not abuse. That's purpose. And having purpose is one of the greatest gifts anyone can have, regardless of age." Riley Martinez flew combat operations until age 18, when she transitioned to adult military service in a conventional fighter squadron. By then she'd logged over 2,400 combat hours, more than most pilots accumulated in entire careers. She'd saved countless lives directly and inspired a generation indirectly. Project Talon continued, refined by lessons learned from her and other early members. The program remained controversial but was never shut down, because the results couldn't be argued with. Properly trained youth pilots with rare neurological gifts could do things adults couldn't, and those capabilities saved lives. But Riley's legacy was more than just the program. It was the broader message she represented. That capability mattered more than age or gender, that dedication and training could unlock potential that seemed impossible, that society's assumptions about what children could or couldn't do were sometimes wrong, that sometimes heroes came in the smallest, most unexpected packages. The passengers from Flight 633 never forgot her. They formed an association, met annually, and raised money for youth education programs. David Chen, the businessman from 11C, started a foundation called Never Underestimate that provided scholarships to gifted youth pursuing difficult paths. Margaret Chen, the elderly woman from 11E, became an advocate for recognizing capability over demographics, speaking at schools until she passed away at age 92. And in Seat 11D of a preserved section of the actual aircraft, now displayed at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, there's a plaque. It reads, "In this seat sat Riley Hawk Martinez, age 12, on December 16, 2024. While passengers dismissed her as just a sleeping kid, she was actually a classified military pilot. When hostile drones attacked this aircraft, threatening 289 lives, Riley emerged from this seat and flew evasive combat maneuvers for 12 minutes until military interceptors arrived. She saved everyone aboard. This ordinary-looking middle seat held an extraordinary hero. Look past appearances. Capability takes many forms. Below that, a smaller inscription, age 12. Height 5 feet 0 inches. Weight 92 pounds. Combat hours, 847. Lives saved, 289. Impossible. Nothing. Every day, thousands of museum visitors pause at that seat. Some cry, some take pictures. Parents point it out to their children, using it as a teaching moment about not judging by appearances, about dedication and training, about rising to meet impossible challenges. And sometimes, very rarely, a small child will stop at the display and look at it with unusual intensity. Their parents will try to move them along, but the child will resist, staring at the plaque with eyes that seem to calculate angles and vectors, that seem to understand things beyond their years. Those are the ones Project Talon recruiters watch for, because somewhere in America right now, there's another 7-year-old with impossible gifts waiting to be found, another future pilot who will dedicate their childhood to training that most adults couldn't endure, another hero who doesn't look like anyone's idea of a hero. And someday, when the impossible happens, when death seems certain, when hope seems lost, they'll rise from wherever they're sleeping and do what they were born to do. They'll save everyone, just like a sleeping kid in Seat 11D once did.